500 Days of Summer was directed by Marc Webb and stars Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Zooey Deschanel and follows the story of Tom, who is mysteriously dumped by his girlfriend Summer, and so he begins to reflect on their 500 days together to figure out how their relationship went sour and figure out something about himself. Now, this is the first installment of a bunch of classic reviews that I plan on doing that are viewer requested, and this was requested by one of my very best friends. And I've known about this film for some time. I knew that this was Marc Webb's first film. He previously had basically done music videos before doing this film, and this is basically a film that got him the job for Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2, and I was really looking forward to this, but little did I know how much I would really enjoy this film, and I absolutely adored this film. The one thing that I love most about this film are the characters and how raw the film is. It is an extremely honest film, and I have to commend the writers for doing this. The writer, or at least one of the writers, based this story off of his own experiences, and I think that is really telling throughout the story. It's an extremely honest take, and it's extremely heartbreaking while also being frustrating at the same time. It feels so real at times. But anyway, let's look at the characters. The characters of Tom and Summer. These are extremely compelling, fun, lighthearted, and romantic characters that are also heavily flawed, and I think that's what makes them so interesting. This film is definitely a commentary on many of the romantic comedies that have been coming out in the past several years, and this one really subverts those expectations by really showing Tom in what's typically known as the female role of trying to pursue this person. And we see how flawed Tom is. Tom is basically playing the nice guy that is trying to get the girl that really doesn't even want a relationship. And so, in this instance, Tom is his own worst enemy. There are many people that talk about this film that seem to understand the film wrong and really see Zooey Deschanel's character as the antagonist, the person that makes Tom's life miserable. However, I do not think that is the case at all. Tom is clearly the villain of his own movie. Everything that happens is because of him pursuing, because he wants to be with this girl that clearly doesn't want a relationship, and she eventually gets into it. They have a great time, but she is constantly telling him that she just wants to be friends, and he just doesn't get that through his head. And I found this extremely relatable because I've honestly been in this situation where I have just fallen head over heels for a girl, and I'm in what's quote-unquote called the friend zone, and I just can't understand that because I want to be with them so bad that I just keep pursuing, and it's obviously extremely unhealthy and a little bit creepy. And it really showed my faults by showing Tom's faults. But anyway, I still love these characters, as flawed as they are. They are extremely likable, but can be extremely irritating. And even though I said that Tom is the villain of his own story, that doesn't mean that Summer is also in the right. She is also an extremely flawed person. She leaves Tom and eventually finds someone else extremely quickly, and then she's eventually married to them. It happens so fast, and obviously we don't get her side of the story. A lot of this movie is focused on Tom, so we are only getting one side, and I found that extremely interesting because, oftentimes in these romantic comedies you get both sides of the story, but you don't in this case, and so I think that makes Tom really seem more in the right than he actually is. I also really like the cinematography with this film. Marc Webb is a music video director. And, you know, I think people that work in music videos know how to make a beautiful image, especially something that's extremely pleasing to the eyes. And I think Marc Webb and his cinematographer do a really good job of conveying just a beautiful looking film. The film has this bluish tint to it, which was used to kind of exaggerate or reflect Zooey Deschanel's beautiful eyes, and it makes for a beautiful image of the film. Also, the soundtrack is extremely enjoyable and fun to listen to. After the movie was over, I looked up the soundtrack and started listening to it, and there's some really good tracks in this film, and they really do a good job of putting them at the exact appropriate moment, and they're just really fun to listen to. I also like the way that the story is told through a series of flashbacks as Tom is, you know, reflecting on their relationship and how things go. And of course, we are seeing it through Tom's point of view, and it's extremely romantic and sweet and fun. But at the very end of the movie, Zooey Deschanel's character begins to tell Tom to look at their relationship through her eyes. And there's this wonderful moment where we see that happening, and we see all the problems that were going on in the relationship. We see, you know, how she's trying to push him away. And that was really extremely telling, and I absolutely loved it. But my favorite moment in the film is when Tom is invited to Summer's apartment to a party, and there's two screens shown on the screen that depict what his fantasy is and then what reality is. And it's extremely telling, and it's something that has constantly gone through my head. You know, you always want to imagine the best case scenario. You want to imagine that everything is going to go right, and then it ultimately doesn't go that way, and your expectations are just completely shot. And it was extremely relatable and kind of depressing, and really, really hit me in that scene, especially when, you know, there's this one part where he's like, you know, he's laughing and having such a good time with her, and it's just him and her, while in reality it's him and a bunch of people. They're not really together, and then she eventually ends up being engaged. It was extremely good, and I love the final moment that they have together at Tom's favorite place, and it's just extremely compelling, and I think made for a rather bittersweet but satisfying end to the film, as I personally feel that Tom, even though he's still flawed and may not have realized all his faults, he has definitely grown a little bit. And I think the final moments in that film show that even if the next relationship doesn't work out, he will perhaps grow from it. And I think that's really what 500 Days of Summer is to me. It's about growing and figuring out who you are, and also looking at your flaws that you don't really see. And that was just extremely compelling to me. Guys, I absolutely adored this film. I think Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Zooey Deschanel are just wonderful together. They give such charismatic performances. The side characters that I also didn't really get to mention are also fantastic, like Clark Gregg, and also that one guy that's from Criminal Minds is absolutely fantastic. Also, Chloe Grace Moretz is in it, and she's a lot of fun. This is just an extremely likable film that is extremely honest, with beautiful cinematography, beautiful music, and just a really compelling story that really hit home for me, and I could really relate to. I'm so glad that I finally got to sit down and watch this film and love it as much as I did. So anyway, guys, with all that said, I'm going to give 500 Days of Summer a 9 out of 10. Well, guys, this really surprised me. This became one of my favorite films of all time, and I'm so glad that it did. It is just a really compelling film, and anybody that has not seen this film, I definitely recommend you checking it out. It is just unbelievable how beautiful and honest this story is. But anyway, I also want to thank my friend that recommended this film to me. Thank you so much. And as I mentioned before at the beginning of this review, I am going to be reviewing more films for classic reviews that people have recommended to me. So you're going to be finding another classic review for me here on the channel this Friday. So look forward to that. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you guys in the next review.